This mission that he started of advocating for the African languages has in any way contributed of him not getting the recognition that he deserved from the world, especially winning the Nobel Prize for the literature category.
And Ngugi spares nobody. He takes the war to every battleground that he considers justified. In Kenya, we honor people in death.
Hello viewers, welcome to a one-on-one interview I'm having with Dr. Barrack. In this interview, we will be discussing the life, legacy, and literary contribution of Professor Ngugi wa Thiongo. My guest, Dr. Barrack, is someone who needs no introduction, but I will say a few about him. Dr. Barrack Muluka, PhD, is a seasoned publishing editor and a strategic and political communications and leadership communication consultant. Allow me to welcome my guest to the show. Dr. Barrack, welcome to this interview in which we will be discussing the late Professor Ngugi wa Thiongo.
Thank you very much, Suleiman. Of course, you flatter me when you say that I don't need introduction. Everybody needs introduction, especially me. Thank you very much.
Everybody needs introduction, but not you. Where were you and what were you doing when you first received the news, Professor Ngugi wa Thiongo?
I actually was in my residence in Nairobi. I had just walked into the house and TV was on in the living room. My wife was watching. It was actually news time, but there was also breaking news, the way it's always broken on TV, yes. Complete with red and white reversed on red. And they were saying that Kenya's renowned man of letters had passed on. And my first reaction was, oh, so he has gone. And that was because a few days earlier, yes, I had seen on a small group that I belong to, which is a book club group, yes, Professor Frank Njenga had posted there a photograph of himself and wa Thiongo in the United States of America, and Professor Frank Njenga was presenting a copy of his autobiography, City Boy, to Professor wa Thiongo. And one thing that was very clear was that wa Thiongo was looking very feeble. That was just a few days before he passed on. And I recall discussing with my wife and saying, hey, he has become very feeble. And so as I saw this, I said, oh, so he has gone. And she said, sad, he has gone.
Very sad.
Yeah, so he consoled his family, friends, the publishing and writing fraternity in Kenya and Africa and elsewhere in the world for this loss. And fortunately, it's the root of all human beings, all living things. It's the direction that we all must eventually go.
You said you console with his friends. Since you are among his friends, let me console you.
Thank you.
I would like to know how long you have known Professor Ngugi wa Thiongo.
I have both known and known about Professor Ngugi wa Thiongo. Yes. I have known about him from when I was in Standard 7 in Ofafa Jericho Primary School in Nairobi. We were very avid readers of literature, growing up in Nairobi and attending school in Nairobi, and we had read mostly books written by Europeans until one of us, a young man at that time from Embu called Roland Jeru, told us of a book that had been written by an African from Kenya, and which he had read because he had an older brother who was in high school and who had a copy of Whip Not Child. And a few days later, Roland brought the book to school, and those of us from within his circle were able to have this first encounter with Ngugi, which was very fascinating. And of course, I went on to be examined on Ngugi. 1976, when I was in Form 4, I was examined on the river between. And in 1978, when I was in Form 6,
Yes.
I was examined on a grain of wheat. And that background gave me the opportunity to interact with virtually the rest of Ngugi's works. In the late 70s, I left my job in broadcasting, basically from this broadcasting house where we are speaking from now,
Yes.
to join Heinemann Kenya, who are Ngugi's publishers, and they were just based here on Kijabe Street. And so from that time we began interacting fairly closely, most of the time, of course, through our managing director, who was also essentially the publisher, therefore, the late Henry Chakava. And I was privileged to be one of Ngugi's editors for some of the later works. In essence, all of us were, because when a script came in,
Yes.
such as the script to Matigari, we would all have an opportunity to know something about it, maybe commission it, to give it to an external reader who understood the language that we did not understand, and read the reports and give the reports back to the author. Or if it was something like Wizard of the Crow, which came out initially as Morogi wa Kagogo, and eventually he translated it into English, then we had the opportunity to interact with the manuscript in its original context and share thoughts with him, which would help to enrich the script further. In the year 2004, I was now the managing director at East African Educational Publishers, and jointly with my chairman, Henry Chakava, we hosted Ngugi to this country. He had been away for 22 years. And when they say he returned to Kenya after 22 years,
yes,
we were actually the people who facilitated his coming back to Kenya. And we had planned a wide slate of activities for him in the country and beyond. Visits to Uganda, Kampala, where we went to the University of Makerere University, where he had been a literature student many decades earlier, and had very good interactive sessions with the literary and intellectual fraternity within that university. Later on, the writers hosted him to an evening event. We took him to Dar es Salaam at the university again, and you know, Dar es Salaam was at some point the headquarters of liberation movements in Africa. We also had an opportunity with him at the University of Nairobi, where he had taught many years earlier, although they refused to give him back his job after his 1 year stint in detention between October 1977 and
to December 1978. His advocacy for good governance, social justice, and a lot of his advocacy has pitted him against the government. And I'm very interested in this particular play, I Will Marry When I Want, which led the government to imprison him. Why is that? What is that particular issue in that book that the government of Jomo Kenyatta saw in that book that made them think that this person belonged to the prison?
It's perhaps not any one specific thing that you would point at and say that this was provocative, because to do so would be to kind of to kind of accuse Ngugi of maybe going overboard and provoking the government to incarcerate him. So I don't think we want to point at a specific thing. Rather, we want to look at the whole play as an item of communication and messaging, and from the thematic perspective that it was addressing betrayal within the framework of the independent nation, that the expectations that the people had of the independent state, particularly the role of government in relation to property and especially land, those expectations had been betrayed. That one of the reasons why the freedom struggle was particularly active and virulent in the Mount Kenya region had everything to do with the land question, which beginning in the early 1900s, particularly with the arrival of Charles Eliot to Kenya in 1903 as the British Consul, had steadily seen land being alienated from the indigenous African population and set aside for European settlement, and also as crown land under the Queen Victoria of England, and afterwards the King of England, and eventually under the Queen Elizabeth II. Within that framework, one of the expectations within the Mount Kenya region was the return of the stolen lands, because those lands were basically stolen. And that which we have called Mau Mau has sometimes also gone under the tag of the Kenya Land Freedom Army. And the Kenya Land Freedom Army was fighting for the restoration of land and land rights. But instead, what you see happening is a cabal of individuals at the very top, many of them former Home Guard families, carrying on with the dispossession of the ordinary Mount Kenya region populations of the land that is essentially their ancestral land. And there's a sense in which this spread all the way into parts of the Rift Valley, in the collective white highlands or former white highlands, so named because only Europeans who regarded themselves as white were allowed to own land after the alienations that took place starting from the early 1900s all the way to 1939, and for which Jomo Kenyatta had been sent to the United Kingdom to attempt to fight for the land rights and for the restoration of the land to the people, but which mission just petered off in the wilderness without any useful outcome. So when Ngugi focuses on the land question particularly, in I Will Marry When I Want, and which has been interpreted to mean that I will support the system or support the government when I want, and I will support it when it's doing what is right rather than what is self-serving. And when he takes that kind of play to the peasant populations of Kamiridu, Limuru, and also in central Kenya and Kenya at large, when some of the artists are ordinary peasant populations, I think the government gets a little apprehensive, and particularly that the play is being rendered in a language which these people understand. And when they look at the people on the stage, the various roles that they are playing, they can identify themselves. They can see, so that is me, so that is Jomo, so that is maybe Njonjo, so that is Moi, so that is whoever. And they feel apprehensive. They think that maybe a revolution, or at the very minimum an uprising, is about to take place. And so they descend upon that community, they destroy the theater, they disperse the performers, the audience, and they apprehend the rioters. And Thiongo is detained. And in 1981, Shaitani Tarafaini hit the shelves to great excitement, but concurrently to great controversy, because Ngugi was a national asset, and Kenyans everywhere looked at him as belonging to them. Did some feel now that he had alienated them, he had left them out? Yes, they did. There was quite a bit of that conversation. It perhaps hasn't quite died, because his own argument was that it was not right that he should write about people who cannot read what he is writing about them. He asked the question, who am I writing for? And those I'm writing for should be able to read that which I write. He draws a clear distinction between the novels or the literary works generally that he wrote in the post Petals of Blood days, and those earlier novels which he refers to as Afro-European novels. And then there are the rest which he considers to be a lot more authentic, because they are rendered in Gikuyu. His response, of course, was that once the book exists in one African language and it has found translingualism, maybe from Gikuyu into English, and then other people may also translate it so that it's published in other Kenyan and African languages. But I think as far as we know, it was only published in Kiswahili language. But Ngugi has of course been translated into very many European languages.
More than 100 languages.
Mm-hmm.
In this mission that he started of advocating for the African languages, has in any way contributed of him not getting the recognition that he deserved from the world, especially winning the Nobel Prize for the literature category?
I don't think so. I don't think that question of promoting an African language would itself constitute a literary crime, if you may put it that way, that would occasion him not being successfully considered for the Nobel award. If anything, the preservation of indigenous languages is a very important concern on the global platform. UNESCO especially has been extremely concerned about that, and in the space of scholarship, we frown upon people who even come up with a concept like minor languages, where European languages are seen as major languages and other people's languages are seen as minor languages. Are we minor people who are speaking minor languages? Are we minor human beings? No. And that therefore being a question of heritage, indigenous heritage, which must be preserved, it will not be the case. I think the main reason why Thiongo has not been able to, or was not able to win the Nobel Prize of, or in literature rather, had everything to do with the abiding thematic concerns in the writing itself. There's the debate about language on the one hand, and then there is the language that he uses to write going hand in glove with that debate. But on the other hand, there are the books that he has written themselves, the subjects that they are covering, and the thematic thrust that they take. So that if you look at the novels, The River Between, Weep Not Child, A Grain of Wheat, Petals of Blood, Devil on the Cross. If I just stay with those 5 first without going further, although I could, you will see that they are concerned about the African condition and the foreign influence or the foreign hand in that condition. That Weep Not Child, The River Between, and A Grain of Wheat are heavily steeped in the colonial period, the colonial dispensation, and the conflicts of that season in the country and especially in the Mount Kenya region. And we are seeing a clash and competition for land. We are seeing a clash of civilizations. We are seeing people killing each other, black on white violence and white on black violence. We are seeing the Mau Mau everywhere. We are seeing the Mau Mau here, the Mau Mau there, the Mau Mau virtually everywhere. And the Mau Mau are cast in those narratives as heroes because they are fighting for the land rights. Would the Europeans reading those narratives warm up to that casting? They probably will not. The Europeans, British and all the others, defamed Mau Mau by labeling it as a kind of madness. They saw it as a kind of disease which they thought people needed to be cured of. And up to the moment that we are speaking, in their records out there, they still understand the Mau Mau to have been a terrorist movement. Are they going to award the Nobel Prize to literature that explains and justifies that movement? I probably don't need to answer that question. But when you move further from that and you look at the other novels, The Petals of Blood, Devil on the Cross, Matigari, they are essentially condemning the neo-colonial Kenyan state or the neo-colonial African state and the foreign hand in the extraction and exploitation of the massive populations of Africa within that neo-colonial state. And Ngugi spares nobody. He takes the war to every battleground that he considers justified. He takes the war to the International Monetary Fund. He takes the war to the World Bank. He takes the war to the International Planned Parenthood Federation. He takes the war to all gatherings where African leaders go to conspire, so to speak, against the peoples of Africa. And of course, the crown of it all is the wizard of the crow that deals squarely with the phantasmagoric African state house and all the caddies and the kowtowing individuals that you find there, and the oppression and its international linkages, and so on and so forth. So I doubt that these people would award Thiongo the Nobel Prize for Literature. That said and done, one would only add by way of consolation that there are very many other great writers like Leo Tolstoy, who never got the Nobel, James Joyce, people like Graham Greene, on Chinua Achebe here, many others who, in our view, were very eminently qualified for the Nobel, but who never got the opportunity to be awarded that prize. Concluding with the observation that there's a lot of lobbying that goes into the winning of that award. And I would conversely say there's a lot of lobbying that goes into not winning that award.
Except the Nobel Peace Prize, the world has celebrated, recognized the work of Ngugi wa Thiongo. But many Kenyans,
Nobel literature, not peace,
literature
yes.
category.
Yes.
But many Kenyan writers believe that as the world has celebrated Ngugi wa Thiongo, back home, you haven't honored him as he deserved. Is that a view? What is your view on that?
In Kenya, we honor people in death. You have seen acres and acres of newspaper writing on Ngugi, and we have honored him in that way. When he came to the country in 2004, there was excitement about him, and Kenyans behaved in a manner likely to show that they recognized him and the great work that he was doing. But we are also aware that just next door, across this road from where we are with you, Harituku Road,
Yes.
he was attacked in the night. And
Alongside with his wife.
Yeah, and it was shameful. I had been with him that day. I just returned to the country with him from Kampala, Uganda, and together with our driver, we dropped him at the residence. But interestingly, as we were getting in, he said to me, Sheriff. He used to call me Sheriff. He said, Sheriff, how are those men looking at me? And I said, which men? He said, those guards there, how are they looking at me? I didn't like the way they were looking at me, and I thought it was just undue anxiety on his part, and attempted to discourage him from developing any untoward thoughts, only for them to be attacked that same night. And of course, the people who were eventually arrested, suspects tried and sentenced to life imprisonment, were 3 guards who had been on duty at that residence. So there's a sense in which we celebrated him, but a sense in which other forces did not quite honor him. For a long time, his books were not examinable or readable in our schools here. Not that they were banned as such, but yes, there's a sense in which they were banned, because the Kenya Institute of Education would publish approved book lists, and the Ngugi books would be conspicuously missing, in spite of the fact that they were being examined all over the world as canonical texts. So it's not the people of Kenya who did not celebrate him. It was the authorities that did not appreciate him. They lived in fear. I suppose if you are passing before the mirror and all the time the mirror is not flattering you, you may want to stop looking into mirrors, turn them the other way around, or perhaps even break them. As an epilogue or footnote to that particular question and concern, I was a student at the University of Nairobi in the early 80s, as I've just stated. And in 1981, in the month of April, to be very precise, we protested against a number of things as university students would usually do. One of them was that Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, who was due to participate in a by-election in Bondo, had suddenly been denied clearance by the KANU party, or to put it more aptly, by the Kenya government. Secondly, there were university teachers, doctors of medicine to be very precise, who were being told by the government that they should choose whether they wanted to work for the government as teachers or to engage in private practice. And we didn't see any conflict between the two. And third was that our teacher, Ngugi or Thiongo, had been denied the opportunity to come back to the university to teach, and we needed him back at the university. So we went out on a demo we threw in, of course, a few other grievances, something about apartheid in South Africa. And of course, as young people, we loved decrying something that we called Western imperialism generally. And I think at that time there was also a bit of a food problem in the country, and they were bringing in yellow maize. We were also protesting against it, as many young people in their early 20s would do. But very, very tellingly, 5 students whose names are known, but who I will spare for today, went to the Nation Center on Tom Mboya Street, and they told the editors there that they did not support the courses for which the University of Nairobi students were agitating, including the quest for Ngugi wa Thiongo to come back to the university to teach. And they told the editors and reporters at the Nation House, as it was called then, on Tom Mboya Street, that they did not want their names to be disclosed. But the reporters and the editors heard that these people did not tell them that do not publish our photograph. So they took a photograph of those students and published it.
Without their names.
Without their names, and said that these students came to the Nation Center to distance themselves from the courses which the rest of the students of the University of Nairobi are agitating for. One of those people is today a prominent leader in the Kenya Kwanza government. And I was surprised when a few days ago I saw a glowing tribute from him to Ngugi wa Thiongo.
Sometimes back he was against the cause that Ngugi wa Thiongo was advocating for. Yes,
he said very glowing things about how he was this and how he was that and how he was, and he used very good English. This particular leader is gifted with the English idiom, which at that time he used to excoriate Ngugi, to condemn him, but which he today, because Ngugi is dead, uses to praise him. I think that hypocrisy has been part of our undoing as a people.
If the Kenyan government failed to celebrate Ngugi wa Thiongo while he was alive, do they have any chance to rectify now and do anything to...
Zero. They have zero. Of course, you're going to see them. They're going to be there with their written speeches, with their ad libitum speeches. You're going to see all of them there, including those who know nothing of Ngugi, who have never read anything he has written, who operated on the energy of received orthodoxy about him, and which orthodoxy was negative, pejorative, condemnatory. That's fine. Some of them were young people in high school and university in the 90s, when the government was banning effigies of Ngugi, Koigi wa Omwere, and others in the streets of Nairobi. And you are going to see them, because now they're in power. You're going to see them coming out to attend the burial. I don't know how the family purposes to organize. That would be of interest to me, and I believe to many others, because Ngugi got to disavow his Christian faith. He had been a very staunch Christian, as he tells us in his essays, which I think are another strand of his writings that require in-depth conversations. And he dropped that. He dropped the name James, which was taken from the Bible, and he became Ngugi wa Thiongo, and believes in our own Gikuyu, Murungu Mwene Nyaga, and forms of worship. So I don't know whether that's how they're going to organize his farewell, but howsoever they organize it, it's within their right and freedom as family, and especially to honor his will. It is one space which I think so far everybody has been very cautious about, but they are in lies Ngugi's final statement about things that he believed in.
There is one man who has stood firmly with Ngugi wa Thiongo, who your former chairman, Henry Chakava. What will you describe the role of Henry Chakava in Ngugi wa Thiongo's journey?
Chakava, God rest his soul in eternal peace, he rested last year, was first Ngugi's student at the University of Nairobi, where he graduated from in 1972. It's a very significant year. I told you that was the year when I first read Ngugi, but Chakava was graduating from the University of Nairobi the same year, having been taught by Ngugi. And to abridge the story, because it's a much longer story, he went on to become the editor at Heinemann, later East African Educational Publishers, and he became Ngugi's editor and publisher, who took a lot of beating on behalf of Ngugi. Copies of books like Matigari in 1986 were removed from the warehouse by the state and they were destroyed. The printing plates were removed from the printers, the printing films, and they were destroyed. Copies were removed from the bookshops and they were destroyed. And Chakava himself underwent quite a bit of trauma at the hands of the state, being abducted. These abduction things are not new. Yeah,
it used to happen those times.
It used to happen those times. Being left, I don't know where, to discover his way back home. We were denied business by the government. We were there, we were part of it. We were denied government. Our books could hardly find their way on the Kenya Institute of Education lists. And it was all to intimidate us so that we don't publish Ngugi. But Chakava remained very faithful to Ngugi and vice versa up to the very end. The relationship between them traversed the boundaries of author and publisher to become family friends. And many times Ngugi, being in the country, would stay at Henry's residence. It speaks a lot also to the greatness of heart that Henry Chakava had, because his home was essentially calling port for all writers visiting the country. You found them there all the time. They would come to the office and we would meet them, have conversations, have a meal, have a drink. They would end up at Henry's. Yeah, so that was the kind of relationship. And Ngugi made that testimony last year when Henry passed on. There was a recorded, I think he joined on a video link, the service at the Nairobi Baptist Church, Ngong Road, where he paid tribute to his departed student, friend, and publisher.
My time is up, but I would like to conclude with two questions. Number one is, Ngugi wrote more than 40 books. That is, he had a book out after every 2 to 3 years. As a writer, give us a sense of the works that goes into book and how easy is it to write a book after every 2 years?
It's a very challenging assignment, especially for someone who also had other assignments that he was undertaking. Ngugi was teaching literature, first here in Nairobi. Before that, of course, he was working as an editor, publishing at Nation House. And even after he left Nairobi, he became a teacher, distinguished professor in the United States of America. Now, you see, first you must have the ideas, you must conceive the book, you must think through your storyline, the plot, what you want to say. You must then find time to sit down to start writing. Writing can be very challenging. There are times when you pick up the pen and you just stare at the blank page and nothing is happening. You may try to scribble a few things and you keep on tearing the leaves of the writing pad and throwing them away. Or even today, when we have now gone digital, you'll be staring at the blank screen in front of you. When you sat down there, you are full of motivation and you knew what you wanted to do. But as you want to get started, it is not getting off. But good writing does not happen overnight. There are people who will tell you how they wrote a certain book in 12 days. They'll tell you, this one I just sat down and then
India's just come flow.
Yeah, and it was done. The others will tell you that they kept working on it. They would sit down and Ngugi, when you read a book titled African Writers Talking, I think it was edited by Lenry Peters and Duadin, and I suppose Dennis Brutus. Ngugi gives an interview. In fact, that book, which was published by Heinemann in the 70s, maybe early 80s, talks about these writers' experience. And Ngugi will tell you, as he does in that collection, that he carries a notebook. And if the ideas come, if he's on a matatu, he will scribble down a few lines. If he wakes up in the night and the idea has come, he will get out of bed and write a bit before going back to sleep. Then all that will be eventually collated, put together as a book. But even when you have finished with all that and you give the book to us now as the publishing editors and we have read, we will still come back to you and tell you that there's this bit here, there's that bit there, would you consider doing this and that? In the writing by Henry Chakava that I have talked about, publishing in Africa, 1 month's perspective, my experience in publishing Ngugi, he says something to the effect that are contrary to the thinking by many readers and even many creative writers, that we automatically accept Ngugi's manuscripts. A lot of reading goes into those scripts, and we give him feedback. We show the scripts anonymously to other people to read, and we take reports which we give to Ngugi, and he listens very painstakingly and with a lot of humility and takes back the work and redoes it. I told you earlier of a portion that was moved from Petals of Blood to eventually find its way in Devil on the Cross, and it was a factor of that kind of advice. And persons like myself, we were there and advised on Wizard of the Crow. Never mind that it had already been translated from Gikuyu into English. We still had spaces where we thought he needed to manage the story slightly differently.
My last two questions, I will combine it. Number one, what is that one book that stand out of the many books Ngugi Thiongo has authored, and you like my viewers or our viewers to read, and your parting shots?
For me, it remains A Grain of Wheat. A Grain of Wheat, one writer said in the 70s, and which I think still holds the truth. One reviewer, I think he was called Patrick Connell O'Brien, he said, A Grain of Wheat is Ngugi's finest work so far, then and now, as a work of literature. In terms of the substance and the subject covered, in terms of the storyline, in terms of the stylistic devices. In fact, A Grain of Wheat is a composite of a succession of flashbacks, of reflectors, of points of view, of a chronological juxtaposition of character and event. It's a beautiful piece of work which everyone should just read, even if just for the sheer beauty of the management. And already that early, he demonstrates some of the literary devices that he is going to employ a lot more in future works like Devil on the Cross, which is very rich with African methods of narrative, art, and performance. That the fundamental difference is that while the later works like Petals of Blood, Matigari, Morogi wa Kagogo as Wizard of the Crow, and Devil on the Cross tend to hide the ideological orientation just thinly under the surface. A Grain of Wheat is better managed in that regard. You can read it purely as a story for purposes of entertainment up to the very end. then you'll sit back and reflect about the thematic thrust and the very fundamental questions of the day that Thiongo is raising. And interestingly, the prophetic thrust, the betrayal of the people by the independent African state, the Kenyan state. Take note that A Grain of Wheat was published in 1967. He must therefore have written it way before 1966 or 65 even, when the country was only
2 years or 3 years old.
2 to 3 years old. But he was talking about things which we are seeing today. The politicians cheating us, their sharp appetite for land and stolen property and things of that kind, and which of course he develops more trenchantly in Petals of Blood and in Devil on the Cross. So if you ask me which one people must read as a piece of art, I would say read A Grain of Wheat. But of course, read also the others, because you will see yourself there. Whether you are the betrayer, whether you are what he calls the comprador bourgeoisie, whether you are the proletariat, whether you are the oppressive state operative, you will see there. And conclusively, in Petals of Blood, school children go out on what is called a nature study session. And as they are studying nature in the field, they are being taught about flowers, the different parts of flowers, from I don't know, the pedestal, the anther, the style, the stigma, and those are the things that we were learning. And they also learn about petals. And one kid sees a red petal and says, oh, these are very beautiful petals, red petals, petals of blood. And he checks and sees that one of those petals has been eaten by a worm. And he asks the teacher, but why has this one been eaten by a worm? And the teacher says, it's the simple law of nature. Some things eat and others are eaten. And in Ngugi's works, you will see yourself there as a thing that is either eating or is being eaten.
Wow. We came to the end of our conversation. Your last parting shots.
Just a message, a tribute to the family, to the friends, to the literary fraternity, to the publishing fraternity, to his students, and to all of us who are privileged to know, to interact, to benefit from this giant, this colossal man of intellect, letters, brilliance, and even to those who didn't know him, but who cherished the things that he stood for. I say poleni sana, and may Thiongo's soul rest
in peace.
In peace. It was a privilege to know you, Professor, to have known you and to have interacted with you. Go well, go in peace. Amen.
Viewers, with that we came to the end of our conversation in which we were discussing the life, legacy, and literary contribution of Professor Ngugi wa Thiongo. I was your host, Suleiman Bukhari. Till we meet again, bye-bye for now.